Hello, my name is Donna Williams, and in this video I'm addressing the issue of self-injurious behaviours in people on the autism spectrum. I guess the first thing that I want to say about self-injurious behaviours is that there's no one-size-fits-all thing. There's no such thing as, here are autistic people and this is what causes their self-injurious behaviours. So you can have one person who is doing self-injurious behaviours as a means of controlling the carer, perhaps because they have something like dependent personality disorder, where they get extremely distressed if the carer is showing attention to somebody else or is even talking to a friend, sometimes even talking to their partner. The person with dependent personality disorder, with DPD, may self-injure, not just disable themselves in order to control the carer and make them take over all of their basic functions for them, but actually self-injure to provoke the carer into leaving the interaction that they were involved in and purely monopolising the carer's attention. Why does someone with DPD do that? Well, they do that because they're afraid of abandonment. If you look up dependent personality disorder, the driving force is fear of abandonment. Why would somebody with autism develop DPD, for example? Well, people with developmental disabilities are far more prone to things like learned helplessness. It is usually a personality trait that's got out of control. People who are very snuggly and dependent and enjoy the baby role, the extreme of that is that if they perceive themselves to be helpless, if they perceive themselves to have significant disabilities, particularly if the carer flag waves those disabilities and is constantly fixating on what's wrong with the person, fixating on that person's disabilities, what happens is that the child picks up this feeling that the carer is the capable person, they are broken, they will always do it wrong, the carer always does it so much better. And the carer may call this love, may so overinvest in jumping to the rescue that you get this. It's almost like the two people have got the one condition. But when it comes to self-injurious behaviours, DPD is one of the major causes of self-injury. So how do you address things if it's caused by DPD? Well, the reason why the person's self-injuring is because they so idealise you and you are so codependent in running to the rescue, and when you do it so well and so consistently and so predictably, and you do give up all of your life and all of your interests and all of your friends and all of your activities, etc., in order to completely pander to every whim that the DPD person has. And so this all reinforces it. So it's like saying, how does a person get off drugs? Well, first you stop reinforcing the taking of the drugs, for example. So you stop being the pusher. And so the carer plays a really important role in turning around not just DPD, but self-injurious behaviours in DPD. So one of the ways that you can turn it around is you've got to stop being so incredibly appealing. You've got to stop being the cosy nest. You've got to become a person who behaves as if you're completely absent-minded, respond, but do so half-heartedly, make mistakes, mess up, act as if you've developed dementia, be inconsistent, be surreal. And stop responding in a predictable manner, because what will happen is the DPD person may then find you less appealing, less ideal, less easily manipulable. They can't instantly know how to press your buttons. there's a chapter on DPD in one of my books, which is called The Jumbled Jigsaw, and the chapter is called Joined at the Hip, and it does give a lot more extensive directions on how to turn around DPD, and that will include the self-injurious behaviour side of that. Certainly, if somebody is controlling you through self-injurious behaviours, when you respond, you shouldn't make it comfortable for them. You shouldn't make everything lovely and quiet and here I am and calm them down, because that's quite addictive. What you can do is you can say, I'm here, you can put all the music up, you can fart, do whatever you want to do that's going to be ridiculous, obnoxious, surreal, sensually not comfortable. Say, here I am, and invite everyone else over, whatever it may be. But what that will do is that when the person is starting to self-injure, they know you're going to bring along with that response a whole lot of stuff that isn't what they want. So it's part of the deconditioning of, if I do A, you'll do B, and you've got to decondition that. Another significant cause of self-injurious behaviours is exposure anxiety. So with exposure anxiety, it is involuntary avoidance, diversion and retaliation responses. And this is a self-protection response that has got out of control and very hair trigger reaction. So people with exposure anxiety commonly will feel really invaded. Some people will use the term emotional rape. If somebody is eyeballing them or using their name, or comes up and tries to fuss and gush at them. So they'll go into avoidance. If the person keeps trying to cajole and get involved and draw attention, they'll generally go into diversion. And if you keep pushing, you'll tend to get retaliation responses, and that can mean self-injurious behaviours. With exposure anxiety, it's almost the opposite to DPD, because the person may self-injure as a means of warning you, back off, warning you, get away from me, warning you, how dare you be this personal, warning you, I'm feeling invaded. So if you think about the growling cat, it's almost like the self-injury is the growl. And with exposure anxiety, interestingly, you also can use, you primarily will use an indirectly confrontational approach, which is related but different, a different version of it to what you'd use with DPD. So just as with DPD, you can use surrealism, you can play the dementia card, you can get that person, you can decondition their expectations. With exposure anxiety, by playing hard to get, keeping things small doses, always leaving the person wanting more, focusing on the object and the issue, not on the person. So always putting the focus onto something else rather than directly invasive. Think cat, not dog. If you think about dogs and interaction, it's all very direct, it's all very enthusiastic. You can do fuss and gush and the dog will love it. Think about the cat. You don't do it that way. The more you play hard to get, small doses, always leave them wanting, focus on the object and issue, pat the ball, but don't chase after the cat, or you get the stuff, those exposure anxiety related type responses. So you will have self-injurious behaviours come up commonly with people with exposure anxiety, and certainly that was my background. So when people used my name, I attacked myself. When people gave me compliments, I attacked myself. When people were threatening to try to be close to me, I gave them the warning of self-injurious behaviours. One of the ways that, other than an indirectly confrontational approach, one of the ways that my mother used was a strategy that I call the yes but strategy. And see, with exposure anxiety, if someone's self-injuring and you say, no, don't do that, the more that you don't want them to do it, the more they know that this will warn you off if they do it. So it actually reinforces it to use no. So what my mother did was reverse psychology, and so I was punching myself in the stomach, and she said, punch softly, punch yourself softly. And so I was confused. I was getting the yes, do it, which made me want to reject it, want to retaliate against my own behaviour. So sometimes by agreeing to it, but telling the person to tone it down, even hand over hand, here, do it gently. It's like, oh, don't you touch me, I don't want to do it. Now I'm not going to do it at all because it'll cause you to come in and try and be my teacher. So I've used this strategy with some kids with self-injurious behaviours, with whom every other strategy had already been used and not working. And where I felt that these were kids with exposure anxiety, so I'd have somebody who was biting, for example, and if you, if you said no biting, etc., they'd clamp down even harder. But if you actually push towards them and say gentle biting, nice gentle biting, they would pull away as if to say, you're not going to make me bite you. I'm not friends with you. We're not going to be joining at the hip here. So with the hair pulling thing, and they're pulling their hair, I might have hand over hand and say gentle pulling, nice gentle pulling, and what they do is they want to get their hand out of there because I'm connecting with them through the self-injurious behaviour, and they are using it as a distancing tool. So I'm causing them to reject their own self-injurious behaviour. And so that's a strategy that's called yes to get no. But it's also the yes but strategy. Anyway, if you're interested in strategies to deal with self-injurious behaviours in people with exposure anxiety, you can find that in a book, another one of my books, which is called Exposure Anxiety, The Invisible Cage. Another aspect of self-injurious behaviours, people who have significant sensory perceptual issues or sensory hypersensitivity issues, especially if they don't have functional communication, because the quickest way to tell people, I am absolutely overwhelmed, I really can't do this, this has gone on for too long, I feel like my brain is frying or my nerves are jangling, the quickest way to express that is and if you've been taught don't attack the other person, or if you are quite autistic in the adjective sense of the word, you tend more to attack yourself than to easily attack somebody else. It may be because you've been taught that there are big consequences for attacking somebody else. It might be that other people suddenly take control of you and that's done your head in, and you've learned instead that the person that you are free to attack is you rather than the other person. But there are some people who are just not oriented towards connecting that much with other people as to attack them. So they're much more connected to themselves. So who do they attack when they're frustrated? Themselves. So if the underlying issue is sensory hypersensitivities, for example, you empower that person to take control of that. It might be tinted lenses to deal with overhead lights or too much visual bombardment. It might be earplugs for handling a lot of sound. It might be headphones for the ability to control what's coming in, especially if you're around a lot of blah, 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 and your brain keeps trying to work out what it means and you get overloaded. The language all gets fragmented in your brain. It all sounds much louder, much faster, and you're having sensory distortions as a result of delayed processing, which is what used to happen to me. And certainly I had self-injurious behaviours associated with, I can't bear it, this is overwhelming, I can't make sense of it, it's absolutely, I've got to get out of here, this is doing my head in. I particularly had it with people talking for too long or insisting that I stay in a room with a lot of language. I was around 90% meaning deaf until late childhood, so even once I could understand language, it certainly wasn't, it wasn't easy for me to handle. And the problem with a severe language processing disorder is your brain continues to collect all of the language in the room and all of the noises in the room. It doesn't filter out what's relevant from irrelevant. It's taking it all in. It all ends up tumbling. Your body is starting to fry. All your nerves are feeling really jangled. It gives you that feeling like you're a caged animal and you just got to get out. So, and in my case, it made the sound much louder, much faster, and people sounded like chickens in a chicken coop on a very mad chicken day, very close up. So you can imagine that would make you feel quite isolated and quite done in. There are other people who will have this because of sensory hypersensitivities rather than sensory perceptual disorders. Some people will have it on to do with touch and processing touch. Some people will have it to do with visuals and processing visuals. Some people will have it to do with sound, and some people will have it particularly to do with language. Giving people a means of communication, even if it's a yes/no button, is a great way to start, so that you can at least ask a question. Do you need time out? Yes. Give them a letterboard. Get out the iPad. Give them a means of communicating what their needs are, so that they have some kind of sensory control within mainstream environments, so that they still get the inclusion, but when they're not coping and if they're not coping, they have the ability to communicate that and facilitate getting themselves out of there. But also take along a box of tools that are going to help them to manage their own sensory issues, whether that's sunglasses or whether that's headphones, whether that's where is the quiet space. When I go to this event, where's the quiet space I can escape to? I used to have a jumping cushion because when I had extreme exposure anxiety, my hearing would be the blood would be rushing in my ears, and my hearing would be incredibly sensitive, and I had a lot of tics, and it's like everything in my body was screaming. And one of the things that I used to use was jumping on a cushion and just getting that rhythm in a real jolt way was enough to really start to reset my body and stop me feeling like I needed to attack, that feeling of being a trapped animal in my own body. So for some people, a V jumping cushion, it could be just the ability to rock, and that is encouraged, or that there is a rocking space for somebody. It could be the ability to get under a table with a tablecloth and just be in a quiet space without any visuals around. And it might mean that you have a timer that says, okay, this is your 5 minutes timeout, here you go. So that they're not under there for the whole of the day, but they know how long they're getting. They know they're getting that 5 minutes. Other reasons for self-injurious behaviours in people with autism: communication frustration, enormous for people who have a range of communication disorders. And although I can speak fluently now, I was echolalic until late childhood, and then I was able to speak, but it was extremely slow and difficult and not easy to understand. So my word order was quite tumbled, and one of my earliest sentences, which I remember from grade 5, was, "I want chair here," and it was much slower than that. So you can see from something like that the level of frustration, not just in having feelings and needs and experiences that you can't convey, particularly if you also have exposure anxiety, so you freeze as soon as you want to express yourself, particularly if you have something like selective mutism where your throat is constricting when you feel that you have something you need to express. Very frustrating. It's made harder when everybody else can communicate more easily and you're the freak. So that identity issues, emotional issues that really heighten the isolation of communication disorders. Even though once I began to get functional speech, which over the years got more fluent, when I was under stress or sensorily overwhelmed or had processed too much incoming language, my communication would slip back and it tended to fly off into echolalia and Donna speak, which meant you couldn't understand it. I could understand it, nobody else could understand it. And in that situation, I think the despair and the isolation that you're still an equal person, but you're not able to function in a way that is considered equal. There's another reason for self-injurious behaviours, a response to response of extreme frustration to being treated as though you're mad, backward, disturbed, being judged, having other people who are speaking on your behalf in ways that you can't relate to, that you don't find respectful, that you find demeaning, that you feel add to your despair as a person who's considered hopeless, or that adds to your alienation, your isolation, your feeling that you are being separated out, or that you're being fixated on as a case, the frustration of not being seen as a person, that you feel everyone's therapizing you, the feeling that everyone's waving you as a charity case, oh, look how much I care about my severely disabled son, daughter, whatever. Put yourself on the receiving end of that. How would you like to be this object that other people are getting their martyr points out of? So not everybody responds well to being a narcissistic object. And I'm going to say it how it is. You can go and look that up, but that's what it is. If you go around advertising and constantly reinforcing and labouring the point about how disabled your child is and gaining martyr points out of it, you're really talking about narcissism and treating the child as a narcissistic object. And that makes non-autistic people feel ill. It makes non-autistic children disturbed. So if you have someone who's autistic and lacks the functional communication with her or access to type speak, and you're doing that sort of stuff, even though other people are reinforcing it, even though TV shows, reality shows, Oprah, Dr. Phil, whatever reinforces it, it doesn't matter. The point is it's not well. The point is it upsets people. It doesn't upset everybody, but some people, and especially many people on the autism spectrum, and I'm talking also about functionally nonverbal people who have typed their accounts, have written about how immensely sickening and frustrating and alienating it was for them to be shown off, felt, as the charity case, felt sorry for, constantly carrying this feeling of guilt for weighing down or taking away their carer's life, or feeling that they're not seen as a person because the carer is just showing off how important their carer role is. And that's sort of quite the opposite to the DPD thing, but it's still worth mentioning in a context of self-injurious behaviours. Okay, another reason for self-injurious behaviour is pain. Do people with autism have pain? Of course they do. And a lot of people with autism have some significant gut, immune or metabolic disorders. This can cause things like cramping, it can cause disorientation, in my case severe sensory perceptual fluctuations, so a bit like suddenly, being on drugs or on LSD, having, your perception really jolt and shift, so everything seems sped up, or background and foreground are suddenly shifting, or you can't understand anything that's coming in, or your speech is suddenly all jumbled, and the frustration of things like that. But also I would get severe cramping, crashing headaches from food intolerances. You can have people with immune issues who get a lot more bugs, viral infections, fungal infections. They might be really itchy. A lot of people with eczema because of allergies, and that's like a monkey on your back all the time, pushing your frustration levels much higher than most people. So if those people are dealing with a little bit of stress on top of that, it's going to feel a lot bigger for them than it might to someone who doesn't have those physical issues. So definitely when you're looking at self-injurious behaviours, do consider the possibility this person has a crashing headache, they have a toothache, they're having arthralgias, muscle, joint, ligament, tendon-related pain, and I have Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disorder. It causes pretty achy, grindy pain in, and we're talking muscles, joints, ligaments, tendons. So you might have somebody who appears to be very flexible with their body, very hypermobile. Do go and have a look at Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, because if they have that degree of flexibility, you might find they have a connective tissue disorder, as well as their autism, and there are commonly a range of genetic and health issues that overlap with the fact somebody is developmentally different, i.e. autistic. Okay, self-injurious behaviour is another reason why people do stuff. They don't think that is self-injurious. They feel that's interesting. They're exploring the sensory reality. They're exploring the physical reality, the emotional reality. So when I was a kid, I did a lot of stuff to see how far I could push the body. So I screamed and screamed and screamed until basically I had no voice, and I enjoyed the rawness and making that happen. I was drinking until I was going to bust. I could have probably killed myself doing it, and it's seen as, if you like, self-injurious. I liked I thought it was funny to be able to punch myself in the stomach and see how much I could handle of that. I used to stress all my, tense my stomach muscles and put a lot of pressure on those muscles until I went really red and was risking bursting blood vessels, which, having vascular Ehlers-Danlos, was a really crazy thing to do. But in my case, I would end up turning blue, shaking, and then fainting, and I found this got me out of classes. So it's another reason people do self-injurious behaviours, not just because they think it's a funny or an interesting sensory experience. They do it because it becomes habit. And once it becomes habit, it becomes integrated into your identity. It's part of who you think you are. And also they self-injure because they get the rewards. So when I would do this forced fainting thing, make myself faint through pressuring my vascular system, the teachers would get me out of the room. And so finding things too noisy and feeling like a freak and not accepted as an equal and all that sort of stuff, it seemed like a great reward to me. You want to reward me? Great, you've got rid of me, and now I can be in my own space somewhere else and away from you. So obviously things like that are going to reinforce self-injurious behaviours for some people. There are a number of people who I've known who've done a range of really full on, if not bizarre behaviours, some of them quite sexual to themselves, and and uh, and they've done this because they're exploring uh, the range of things that they can do with their body, the range of feelings they can get out of their body. Self-deprivation, and that feeling that you are surviving, that you are extremely autonomous, that nothing can conquer you. I was definitely one of these people, so I did the starvation thing, I did the fingers down the throat vomit thing, seeing how long I can go without drinking, seeing how long I can go without, the eating, not wanting to give in to sleep, so sleep depriving myself. All of this stuff, I wanted to feel impervious. I wanted to feel extremely resilient. And don't we all want to be like a superhero at some time? But once you get into the habit of this, I think it is a self-injurious behaviour, and you've got to, I guess, pull back from that. If you were dealing with this in somebody, the question regarding how to stop it is to say, why does this person feel so disempowered that they feel the necessity to so desperately prove that they have control and power over their life and their body? So when I felt happy in my life, and I and I felt silly and accepted and creative, and I could get on with my own thing, I wasn't doing this crap. When I felt that my life was out of control and it was managed by everyone else, and I was being seen through their eyes, I felt I didn't have any of that self-determination. I didn't have any of that autonomy. That's when I did those kind of behaviours to prove that I had the control over the body. Self-injurious behaviour is another reason. Some people will attack themselves because they can't identify with the body. So you'll have people who dissociate, who cut off, who go puppet on you because they've stepped out of identifying with the body. They let you manage it, or they just abandon it. They just sit there staring and not using it, not responding. And when the body then gets sick, you've got a cold or whatever, and as an immune deficient person, I was used to this. I was used to pain, but my body meant pain. Ear infections, lung infections, throat infections, constantly. And I'd had that stuff since I was 6 months old. So by the time I was in early childhood and then late childhood, I was really honed at not just how to tune it out, but then later I got really angry with it. I didn't think I'm neglecting myself. I thought I'm paying the body back. I didn't think, I'm failing to look after myself. I just would be angry at the body getting sick again. So I guess it's kind of like if you imagine someone who sets themselves up in their psyche as there's their personhood and then there's their body, and if they feel the body has done something wrong, they're going to retaliate against it. They're either going to ignore all of its needs, or they might actually attack. And I, when I had a lot of pain in my joints as part of the Ehlers-Danlos loss, I was in late childhood, and my response to it was to smash the hell out of it and throw myself into walls. So why did I do that? I did that because I was so angry with the body. How can a person be so angry with the body? Don't they see that that's them? Not if you've spent your life dissociating from your body, particularly if you have ongoing health issues. And not if you have learned that that's a kind of power and that's a kind of freedom. And I think there was an inbuilt reward in that the more that I could separate out the health issues, the more that I could reinforce and celebrate my own world and my personhood. And so there was a built-in positive about it. how did we get around it? One of the things that really helped was I was given pot plants in late childhood and my teens, and it was my responsibility to look after these pot plants. And eventually I got it, and so I learned there was this tedious role of looking after this thing's body, and then I learned that I had to look after the body as if it was a pot plant. I had to water it, I had to feed it, I had to keep it warm, I had to not let it get burned, I had to not let it freeze, I had to not mistreat it too much, and if it wasn't well, I had to bring it back to life. And it was through the pot plant example that someone who had spent their whole life dedicated to dissociating from their body became progressively the mother to that body. I developed the self-parenting thing in relation to the body, but objectively depersonalized from it. But over time, I came to care about the body as if it was another person. And then eventually I started to, and it took a long, long time, started to really care about it. And I think modeling really helps. If other people are sick of you being sick, you get sick of you being sick. If other people sort of take it in their stride, and you're not a world apart, and everything is still quite normalized for you, and this is just some little stuff along the way. I think I retrained in that relationship to the body, and I'd say I care about it now, and I do identify with it a lot more. I do think I identify it as self, but not the whole of myself. I guess I'm still quite Buddhist in that sense, that I did achieve an extreme detachment from body, this really strong sense that I was more than my body. So it is a positive and it is a strength, but you can do it so well that it causes other problems, which is that when the body gets sick or whatever, you either ignore it or you get angry at it. And if you get angry at it, then people express the anger. I think that's another one, is that self-injury in people with autism is commonly that they've been taught how to be good and how to comply, and people have been afraid of them having anger. And I think giving people a safe means of expressing that anger is really useful. I mean, if we were cats, we'd have a scratch post. We'd have a piece of wool that we could get in and wrestle with. So with people with autism, do we have our own punching bag? Do we have a pillow that we can go and wrestle with? Do we have a large box that we can throw things into so that they can safely smash without hurting us? Do we have stuff that we can shred and tear without it having to be our own hair? Do we have some things that are rubber and chewy that we can gnash and get into without it being biting into your own arm? So if you provide people with the validation that frustration's normal, anger is normal, and that you can have a toolbox with which, a whole range of means with which you can healthily express your anger, your despair, your fear as well, because any of those emotions, your sadness, any of those emotions can lead to self-injury. And I mentioned DPD, possessiveness, can lead to self-injury. One of the things that I also think with self-injury that is really important is, if the person has been self-injurious, don't over-fixate on that. Once they've come through that, let it go. Get back on with their sense of of life. So I think that's pretty important. So I'm sure I haven't covered everything. I mean, attention seeking. There will be people who self-injure as part of attention seeking. Are there people who love creating a drama? Yes. Is that everybody's personality? No. Some people, it'll be the opposite. The reason that they self-injure is not to draw attention to themselves. They're trying to stress that you have become too invasive. You are showing too much attention. Back off. Some people with DPD, for example, will draw attention to, hey, come away from everything that you're doing. I'm self-injuring, but it's not because they just love attention. It's because they fear losing control of you. And so taking this one-size-fits-all, oh, they're all doing it for attention, I think is really simplistic, and it's not sensible. It doesn't apply to all non-autistic people, and so it's certainly not going to apply to all autistic people. And although there are some who love attention and are on the autism spectrum, there'll be others that's not the deal for them. I think one of the things with self-injury as well is as a form of self-expression. So if you have people who have no means of self-expression, the more that you can expand their world, whether it's through arts, whether it's through movement, whether it's relating to animals, whether it's relating to plants, whether it's gardening, whether it's having a sensory room, or whatever it might be, something that they can identify with and express themselves in relation to or express themselves through is really important. And another one is when it comes to feelings, help people to gauge whether things are they at a 2, are they at a 4, are they at an 8? Because a lot of people with autism can't easily gauge that. They'll have a little bit of an emotion, feel really uncomfortable about that feeling, and suddenly they'll escalate what was actually a 2 into an 8 or a 9. So you need to help them to reality check that. So was that little pebble in their shoe really a 9? Was it so full on that it really deserved them to, start pulling their hair out? Or, if somebody cut their leg off, would that be a 9? And if that's a 9, then what's the pebble? Maybe the pebble's actually about a 2 or 3. So giving people a way to gauge what that emotion is, what the level of that emotion is. So helping them to identify which emotion it is, and helping them to gauge which level it's at, but then giving them a list of choices of things that might help them to calm themselves down, to manage that feeling in a different way. And that's part of training people to self-parent. So if you've got someone who's self-injuring, chances are that they need more development in that self-parenting thing, and you can put those tools in place. So I'm sure that's not the whole not the whole deal, but I think there's plenty there, and I hope you found that useful. You can find more information on my website, donnawilliams.net. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye.